Hi, 93. I just want to do a very brief video on sort of riffing off of just one little section of a book by J. Edward Cornelius. It's called Aletheia, and the subtitle is Astrology in the New Aeon for Thelemites. You can get a copy of this book at the Weiser Antiquarian website, which I'll link below. It was written by the head of our AA, J. Edward Cornelius. And I specifically wanted to talk about just the first four houses of the zodiac as they relate, as he relates them to the tree of life. So let's just talk very briefly about the houses. So as you may know, the entire idea behind a chart, an astrological chart, is when you're on Earth, you look up at the sky, and whatever bodies are there are what are appearing in the chart, representing in our microcosm, chakras, parts of our soul, so to speak. Now, the division of the astrological chart into 12 houses talks about the different departments of life on Earth. There's many brilliant things to say about them. There's great books on the houses. I may link a few down below that I recommend. But the point is they're departments of life. So on a practical level, when you see a planet in your natal chart, you look at the house it's in and you say to yourself, like for example, my sun. My sun is my consciousness. It's the center of my identity. It's the center point of my life as I see it, as I see everything. And remember, we chose all of these things to do our will upon the earth. So whatever house that's in is this preferred expression. It's where I ought to express my sun in this case. So the house will tell us the department of life. So let me talk. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to read a few brief snippets from J. Edward Cornelius' Aletheia regarding what he sees as the correlations between just the first four houses and the tree of life. So these are Qabalistic correspondences. If you're not familiar with the Kabbalah, then I guess I'll make a link to another recommendation there for just how to see the image of the tree. I mean, I'll flash it up, but you're probably going to need to do a little bit more work. So in any case, the first house of the chart, for him, it correlates to Malkuth Yasad, which is our earth and our astral body. So it's our physical body and he quotes from the Book of the Law, which is in chapter 150, where it says, "There's a word to say about the hierophantic task. Behold, there are three ordeals in one, and it may be given in three ways. The gross must pass through fire." I'll pause there. The gross must pass through fire, he relates to the man of earth. So in the AA, just like in the OTO, the man of earth relates to the one who's mastering their nefesh or their animal soul. They're mastering their life on Malkuth. They're learning the law of Thelema, and they're living accordingly. So that's the magical correspondence between to the man of earth. And he's saying these first four houses specifically relate to that grade. So he says of the first house, it is ruled by a fire sign. And what he means by that is modern astrologers will relate the first house of the chart to Aries, that fiery energy of emergence from nothingness, so to speak, into existence, that coming out and being someone. And he says, basically, he's relating this directly to the quote, "The gross must pass through fire." He says Crowley claims that all souls in this AM would pass through this spiritual fire simply by accepting the law of Thelema. So the idea is that when you accept the law of Thelema, which says, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," and the thou is that universal will, is the will of God, but it's through the incarnations, the acceptance that I am God, you are God. When we accept that, and we accept our godhood, at least in principle, because in the man of earth, you're just sort of like, you could even be taking it on faith and then trying to put it into practice. You're going to go through spiritual fire. You're going to be tested to see, are you really truly willing to take personal responsibility for your actions, to live by your law, your own law, to not look to outside of you, and to go through tests, which happens when you get initiated, you go through tests. And so there's going to be always these tests to say, can you get your Malkuth in order? Can you get your relationships in order on Earth? Things like that. So if you blow out on Earth, there's something going wrong, and you're going to need to make some refinements. The second house, he says, he relates that to the zodiac sign Taurus, which again is very common in modern astrology. So here and which of course he says is ruled by Venus, he relates it to the path of the moon. Now the moon is exalted in Taurus. The path of the moon on the tree of life is linking Malkuth to Nitzak. So it's linking the physical elemental part of ourselves to Venus, or to the Muladhara chakra, to the Manipura chakra, to that which basically takes and assimilates and then brings it back upward. He says of this house, he tells you the basic correlations. It relates to money, cherished possessions, values. So normally the second house on a mundane level is how do you earn, what do you value, what do you enjoy. So it's like relating to the by sign and anything in the house, what you care about, what's bringing you joy, what are your possessions. I would say that by relating this to the path of the moon, there's an acknowledgement that we work with our material world according to our values. By doing so, we actually bring something into being. The moon is the path of the moon itself is actually Pisces, and it relates to dreaming. So when we come into alignment with our true values, we dream our reality into existence. So the idea would be, truly dream that which matters to you. Now the third house, again, according to the modern astrologer and J. Edward Cornelius, relates to the sign of Gemini. Because it's ruled by Mercury, and he relates this path to the path of judgment, which again comes out of Malkuth and relates to Ha. These are the three rainbow paths, by the way, Kesha. So the judgment path, which Crowley calls Aeon, from going from Malkuth to Had, it's, again, the third house by itself is communication, short distance travel, relationships with siblings and neighbors, simple close relationships, as in people who are physically close to you, you're familiar with them. It's not necessarily intimate, but it's familiar. Gemini and the Mercury relates to the intellect, how you think, how you talk, how you communicate. So that's what the basic matter of the third house is. Now, what does that have to do with the path of judgment, or Aeon? So Aeon itself is the spiritual fire that we just talked about. It is that fire. And in the new Aeon, the way that Crowley understood the card is, it has to do with once there's a certain time in a certain development of things, where things are up in the air, where they can go in different directions. But at some point we make a judgment. We actually take an action, or we basically expel that fire in such a way that the matter becomes closed. So here's all the possibilities, and then it comes down into an actual reality principle. So the fact that this house is governed by Mercury tells us that the way that we think, and especially when we come to a conclusion with that fire, we set the reality into a certain form. What it was before is gone. What is now is regenerated, it's new. So there's a new world that we create. So the lesson is, think, basically use your mind in such a way that either keep it open and remain fluid, or when you decide to manifest something, come to that conclusion, put your fiery force behind it, and make it so. So in other words, by basically firming it up, by believing it that way, by actually putting that fiery magical energy into that form, it becomes solidified. The world becomes that way. So you take radical responsibility we have the responsibility whether you take it or not, but if you take it, you're actually creating with fire a new world. And finally, the fourth house, he relates that to the path of the world, which is it's the middle path, so it's from Malkuth to Yesod, or from the elemental world to our moon or astral form. As he, of course, notes, it's related by modern astrologists to Cancer. So the fourth house traditionally has to do with home, family, how you're nurtured. Crowley calls it, he says it describes the birthplace and the home. It's imagination, it's dreaming qualities, it's unconditional love, or that motherly love we hope, that we wish for in relationships. And he says, I think this is the most revealing part here, the path of the world tethers our soul to our body, our birthplace. On an inward level, this house refers to the overall mundane type of incarnation that a person has chosen, and the moon sign. So in the tarot card of the world that Cornelius is relating to this fourth house, it's actually Saturn, or it's in the sense that it is the form that our universe takes, the structure that our universe takes, period, but especially when we have acknowledged that we've created it. So to sort of recap, and then I'll come back to this again. In the moon path connecting Malkuth to Nitzak, you're dreaming it. In the judgment path, you're setting it with fire. You're actually like solidifying, firing the clay, so to speak. And then in the world, the universe that you see around you is your magical universe. If you don't like what you see, if you're in conflict with what you see, then you're in conflict with yourself, because you've actually created this universe. It's reflecting to you the face of your God. And whether you see something, if you see something negative, it's not that your God or goddess is negative, it's that you are projecting something on that face that isn't there. And to actually have a positive experience of your universe means that you're in harmony with yourself, because that means that your will, which is always coming down through what you intended, what you took this incarnation for, and the way you're working with it are in sync. So, if they're not in sync, if your world, your universe is not what you hoped, it's time to take a look at what do you need to change about the way that you're thinking, the way you're feeling, the way you're working, to make it harmonious. Hope this has been helpful. Again, I've been relating to you about the man of earth, how you work with your Malkuth, the growth must pass through fire, regarding this book. I don't know if I can show it to you here, Aletheia by J. Edward Cornelius. And again, you can get that at Weiser Antiquarian. So I just wanted to give you a quick practical addendum to the four houses. First four houses, the man of earth houses in your chart, relating to Aletheia, J. Edward Cornelius's book, Astrology in the New Aeon for Thelemites. So just in terms of how to work with that information, in terms of, let's talk about the first house. So the sign on the cusp of the first house, or your rising sign, is going to tell you how best to engage with your physical body and your astral body. Any planets in your first house are basically to be exercised in that regard. So for example, if you have Mars in your first house, you would be somebody who would be well served through athletic activities, through working your astral, that's how you initiate action. Or another example would be like Jupiter in your first house. And that means that you have a regal bearing. It's best to actually carry yourself as that sort of like symbol of your highest values. So you're actually a walking, talking embodiment of that, a kingly figure. These are just some examples. Or Pluto, you channel power through your body. Obviously, there's more nuance to all of these things, but the second house. So there we have Taurus and the moon. So the moon path connecting Malkuth to Yesod has to do with dreaming and basically working your astral in such a way as to not get lost. So the sign on the cusp of that house is the best, the way to engage your dreaming self, your astral self, your working of your elemental self for will. That's the best way, is in the manner prescribed by the sign. And if you have planets in the second house, they're teaching you about how to manifest, hopefully in accordance with will. So again, if you have Venus there in the second house, then you would be working with aesthetic principles, with relationship, with grace and beauty, if you had, I'm just giving fake examples, if you had Saturn there, to basically be very serious, to be very solid and somber, to become an expert in the matters of the second house of earning, maybe doing business, something like that. In terms of the third house, where you have the path of judgment, which connects Malkuth to Had, and again, normally we talk about this as the communication house and getting along with people and things like that, and writing. So there, the sign on the cusp, because judgment has to do with solidifying your universe through fire. In other words, when you put your libido in a definitive way, and where you come to a conclusion, that is what you will manifest. So the sign on the house tells you how to approach that the very best, and in accordance with will. And then any planets in the house will help you. So again, just to give examples, if you have Mercury in that house, well, definitely in a very fluid mercurial manner that really emphasizes communication and the ability to change. If you have the moon in that house, you should approach your communications and your conclusions the way that you formulate your fixed models, even if it's not really a belief, is with loving care, with nurturing, with gentleness, with soulfulness, and so that's where to apply. So that any planets in the house are you should apply them toward that type of thinking. And then in terms of finally the fourth house, which is the path of the world, then, and again, traditionally this is the path governed by the moon and nurturing and our origins and our family, things like that, and the world that we create. It is the world that we create. It's our universe. It's how we're rooted. So again, the sign on the cusp of the fourth house, between the third and the fourth, is telling us how we should approach constructing our life, how we should approach being rooted in the world, how we should approach. But it could be our literal house. But it could also just be our roots. How do we root ourselves? In what manner? So, for example, in Scorpio, it would be like with great intensity to get to the root of things, and potentially it would involve continual transformation. Versus, let's just take Taurus for the other example, to create a very solid, comfortable, sensually delightful home. Much about creature comforts and things like that. So there's different ways of being rooted in the world. Planets in that house talk about forces that we bring to bear. So like if you have Jupiter in the fourth house, for example, you would be looking at creating an order around you in your little shell, in your universe, looking to be rooted through your sense of values, the highest values that you have. But having, for example, Venus there means you should pursue your love and your relationships with the aim of being rooted to the matter of being rooted. So it could either literally be in the family, keep the love in the family, or it could be depending on the sign on the cusp. I mean, if you had the cusp of the fourth house in Sagittarius, for example, which is a much more like wide-ranging, freedom-seeking type of a sign than, say, Cancer, then for Sag, your Venus in there might say, hey, apply your sense of love and aesthetics to wandering the world, either literally in the terms of traveling, or to your inner travels in philosophy, in thought, and basically make aesthetic principles and make relationships around that value system. So I hope that's helpful, just to give you some natural kind of idea of how to do this on a practical level.